Joining me now from Southern California, prosecutorial attorney and legal analyst Wendy Patrick. Are you kidding me, Wendy?
She had to have been kidding.
I mean, come on. You know, it's interesting. You read the president's Twitter, and he's responding to this phony request by Nancy Pelosi to have him come testify. He's responding by saying, yeah, I'm thinking about it. But, of course, you put on your defense attorney cap, and you say you're a White House lawyer. There's no way in hell, sorry to use that word, but there's no way in hell the President of the United States is ever going to come before Adam Schiff and company.
No, absolutely not. And we had the same conversation, Graham, you and I, when there was talk about him testifying in front of Bob Mueller. It would never have happened. It won't happen. He has no intention of doing it, nor should he. So this type of rhetoric back and forth between the president and Nancy Pelosi, I think most people understand that for what it was.
But can we point something out here?
Yeah.
As a prosecutor like yourself and as a defense attorney like yourself, you don't put a defendant on the witness stand for a whole bunch of reasons, right? You can't control the questioning all the time. You can't control the answers. Even if the person is innocent, you don't put the person on the stand, right?
That's right. There's just too much opportunity for error. There's too many opportunities for mistakes, for especially in the president's case, for not being precise. I mean, he has a reputation, and he'd be the first one to admit it. He speaks off the cuff. You can't do that when you're under oath, particularly in a day and age where one thing can get you slapped with a perjury trap. We've seen some of this happen. And what we mean when we use that term, Graham, just because it sounds really bad, is if you misremember something, but you authentically and genuinely try to tell the truth, that's not perjury, because under the law, perjury requires a willful misrepresentation. But the risk of saying one thing on one day and something else on another is just too real to let almost anybody testify unless they absolutely have to.
And you don't have to tell members of the Trump administration the penalties for such a perjury trap. We have Michael Flynn, who's suffering through it right now, among several others, including Roger Stone. Now, the case itself, it seems to me from a lay perspective, when I look at this from a legal perspective, as also a constitutional perspective, because they're wholly different, but from both perspectives, it seems as though, to me, the case is crumbling given some of the information that we know now that's not being disseminated, as Congressman Zeldin pointed out. There was testimony over the weekend that was behind closed doors the American people may never see. I hope we get to see this transcript where this OMB guy comes in there and puts water on part of the Democrat narrative. But if you look at what they're trying to prove, Wendy, they're trying to prove quid pro quo, they're trying to prove bribery, and they're trying to prove a cover-up. Let's start with quid pro quo. You look at the timeline. July 25 was the phone call. Okay, this is a fact, right? And it was August 29 that the date that the Ukraine found out that the aid was held up. So quite some time after the phone call, July 25 phone call, August 29, the date Ukraine found out that the aid was held up, and then the aid was released on September 11th, just a couple weeks later. How can you have a quid pro quo on a phone call on July 25 if you don't know that the aid is held up?
That's right. So these are unrelated dots that the Democrats are seeking to connect. So in order to do that, and their theory is no doubt there was an attempt at a quid pro quo, unless there's some sort of another theory that they're relying on. You'll notice they switched from quid pro quo to bribery, reportedly based on a public poll about what Americans thought about the variety of terms.
Right, but same thing, right, Wendy?
Well,
how can you have bribery if you don't know you're being bribed, right?
Yeah, you're still lacking the knowledge element, and I gave you that other fancy Latin term last week, mens rea. You can't prove somebody's mental state.
Right.
Graham, these witnesses, think about what they are contributing to the mental state, as you rightly point out that we need. Last week, all of the witnesses was about, here's what I heard. This week is going to be about, this is what I overheard and how it made me feel. None of that is relevant to what the president knew or intended to do or to accomplish on that call. So many people watched last week's testimony and thought it was more fizzle than sizzle. Question whether this week is going to be more exciting in terms of proving the elements we need, even though we don't need to prove a crime, to prove some kind of an impeachable offense.
All right, but George Kent, it was largely overlooked and glossed over, but last week, you're talking about the testimony last week, including George Kent, and he said something very profound, and that is, through the State Department's perspective, money, aid to countries is often conditioned. there are often conditions put on the money flowing, especially to a rogue country. And Ukraine is one of the most dangerous countries on the planet in terms of law and order. And so having conditions on money sent to another country is not unusual. This is important. But let's go to the cover-up now. And this Tim Morrison. Who's Tim Morrison? Well, Tim Morrison is a member of the NSC, or a former member of the NSC, and he testified over the weekend. Morrison provided new details on the moving of the transcript between the president and Ukraine's leader to a highly classified server, saying, quote, "It was a mistake. The executive secretariat staff misunderstood the recommendation to restrict the access." Okay, so this is an important witness, right? If you're trying to prove a cover-up, and the cover-up ostensibly is taking the transcript and moving it from one server to another server, ostensibly, I guess, to hide it, here you have a guy come out and say, well, no, it was put on that server by mistake because somebody interpreted they wanted it there. This is a big piece of evidence, a big piece of testimony, is it not?
Well, yeah, and you know, the interesting thing, and the reason I'm laughing, is we keep talking about evidence and testimony as if we were in a courtroom. Putting a gavel in Adam Schiff's hand doesn't make him a judge, nor could he keep control of the courtroom last week that we saw constantly. Right. But it's frustrating to be talking in these terms. I wish we were in a real courtroom because we'd have the kind of legal and evidentiary safeguards that would ensure that the information that was brought forth was reliable and credible. By the way, credentials don't equal credibility. We have to look at whether or not somebody's testimony actually has anything to do with what the lawmakers on both sides are seeking to elicit. So yes, what we have, Graham, exactly as you say, is we have things coming out behind closed doors that we wish the real voters at the ballot box would at least be able to see. And we have evidence coming out publicly that has nothing to do with what the president did or didn't believe he was trying to accomplish on that phone call.
And so you look at the step back of the big picture of what we have so far, and I ask kind of plaintively, do you see anything that rises to the level of impeachment? And again, impeachment is meant to be a constitutional process. Unfortunately, in this case, and probably in prior cases, it's been bastardized and become a political process. From a legal perspective, it's hearsay. It's witnesses who've overheard conversations. All of this stuff would be laughed out of court, right? If this was a legal proceeding?
That's right. And if it was admitted, might be admitted for a limited purpose only. And the jury, the real jury, would be asked to only consider it for that purpose. And plus, the witnesses that you've heard probably wouldn't have come forward to begin with because they don't have relevance as to what the Democrats are looking at. But here's the other thing. A trial is a search for the truth. It's not trying to find a cover-up that might indicate whether or not there was a crime. And let's put crime in quotes because that's not even necessary in a political process. So when you wrap all of that together with the knowledge that this thing is dead on arrival in the Senate, the president will never be removed from office, don't you think the constituents would rather their lawmakers be looking at the kind of kitchen table issues that everybody cares about, especially going into the holidays?
This is a process in search of a crime to affix on a political leader of the Republican Party that the Democrats have been searching for nearly 3 years now. That's the fact. Wendy, thank you.
Thank you.
Want to see more videos like this? Click on the link below and subscribe to One America News on YouTube. And call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call and subscribe today.